about the other day, Black Pigeon.
So you believe we should set up total war structures as a means to prevent war?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because maintaining the both, so a country like America, just say for example, so a country like America, with the technological advantages that it has and the still relatively large population, um, I think that if they were actually on a full total war stance, maybe not like 100%, but maybe something like 90 or 85% total war, just not what they're at now. I mean, it's been fighting constant wars, but against like very weak opponents, and like I said, this drip feeding of violence that's only radicalizing more people.
Well, let me before because I know it looks like Ibon is going to be moving on to his other topic pretty quick
Oh
here.
Hey,
yeah,
go ahead and finish up. Go ahead
Let
and
me
finish
ask you
up.
one question here. Let's say like USSR, all their WMD capability vanished for one day, magically vanished for one day, and the US had a means of wiping out the USSR without destroying the global environment. Should they do it?
yes, immediately.
See, I don't think they should.
Well, I think it's just the longer that you let that situation go on, the more likely everyone is going to die. So if you have a way to end it for sure with fewer than everyone casualties, you should take it.
But it won't end it. The technology like doesn't disappear just because the
Well,
US.
I'm talking about your hypothetical situation though. There.
Yeah, but even if you wipe out the USSR, the technology still exists. Like it's still out there in the world. Someone else will develop it. I mean,
Oh yeah, of
the
course.
slaughter
Yeah,
and
it's just
just
like
the slaughter of like hundreds of millions of people in one shot like that. Um,
well, it's like I would
it's
always do before
unacceptable.
the well, it's like I would always do in the game Civilization before the current version made this impossible to do, which was it was possible to continuously keep your if you could say get to aircraft carriers before anyone else, you could keep everyone else in the industrial era and not go into the modern era.
Yeah, I
Like
mean that's the model that we use today in the world.
no, no, no. We don't do that because people aren't literal feudal serfs under us.
We use a similar model, though. I mean, large parts of the world are in the like barely industrial and pre-industrial eras, and we intentionally suppress them.
No,
And
but we
as we moved
suppress
in,
them without then actually governing them to give them the benefit without teaching them how to do it themselves.
we often do
So,
govern them
well,
just
what do you mean?
indirectly. Well, we control their economies, we kill their leaders, and replace them with our
Yeah, but we
proxies.
don't tell their people how to live their lives, so those people still keep supporting the same crappy shit that's already going on there.
But we do tell those people how to live their lives. We put them on plantations, for example, and make them pick bananas.
Well, you're all there. That's not really telling them. That's more of an incentive that they can choose to work at that banana plantation. If the
They
person who works at
can't.
that banana plantation, or if the guy who owns it is a bastard, they can just move to some other place to work.
They can't.
Theoretically.
Like with it, we've been like this is clear history. Like
Oh,
people
you're
say,
talking about like the Banana Republic Wars and stuff like
yeah,
that, right?
like if you say fuck off, a group of us are going to go off into the hills and just farm. We don't want to pick your bananas. They get chased down and they get killed
Oh,
as an example to everyone else. So these people don't have like choices in their lives like you're describing.
It depends on the place. Depends on the yeah. Pretty much depends on the place and the ruling body. Really, you could do
yeah.
that.
Sorry to derail that.
Don't worry about it. It happens all the time. I'm even guilty of it. All right. So now on to the topic at hand, which is President Trump initiates the new space farce. Sorry if I say it the wrong way, but I think it's a farce. And here's an article. And to be fair to President Trump, I'm going to pick his news source of choice, which is Fox News. And he says Trump praises military, calls for Space Force as new branch of armed forces. He says, "Oh wow," it says the administration will give them the largest pay raise in over a decade, while touting successes around the globe, even suggesting the creation of a new military branch, the Space Force. Um, Now, does he give any details? Are you guys familiar with this? I don't see any details here. He says, I'm taking the largest military buildup since Ronald Reagan. Or I'm talking the largest military buildup since Ronald Reagan, and one of the largest buildups in the history of our nation. Noting that the proposed military budget would be $716 billion in 2019. Wow, we suddenly have a need for a Space Force, don't we?
Well, I mean, the thing is if they've figured out some new way to cheaply manufacture suborbital or, near Earth orbit troop transport rockets or space planes, maybe Raytheon and Lockheed Martin want to make a bunch of them.
Well, and I agree with your point that this is a way to bring some of this stuff onto the budget, right, onto the open budget. But I think it's also a step towards challenging some of the conventions against space warfare. Like, I think we'll start seeing, like, the U.S. challenge some of these things.
Well, it makes perfect sense because if they
other actors are entering into the arena. But for a long time there, we were the only ones, Russia and us, and it was really just us. Like, we're dominating that. But now we're starting to see other nations kind of move into space.
I don't think we were dominating all too well.
Dominating like the high ground, it's like the suborbital environment. Yeah, we were.
Oh, I thought you were talking about us going to the moon. We were 10 for 10 going to the moon from Apollo 8 to Apollo 17. No one died. We were a perfect 10 for 10. Yet we don't want to do it again after 50 years later. We can't because we lost all our data. We lost all our telemetry data. We lost all our data on how to get there. 50 years into the future, where we have the more computing power than what was on board within the tip of our hands with our phones. Yet we can't get down there to the moon again. So
I would say that the U.S. had dominated that arena from maybe the mid 60s up until the early to mid 2000s. And I mean, we still dominate it. I mean, I know Russia has the we don't have a space on the book space program anymore, but nonetheless,
International Space Station.
Yeah, we don't have a means of getting our people up there or any of this crap. But nonetheless, militarily, we still dominate that arena. It's just that other actors are coming into it, and I think we're starting to look at some of these space conventions and we want to put Rod of God up there. Legally put it up there.
I mean, right now, I think China is probably more advanced with their space stuff than us. Otherwise, unless what Russia and China are doing is just propaganda as much as the U.S. I mean, I feel like we can go up to the Earth's orbit and stuff like that, but getting to the moon. Oh, hey, Ellis. Go ahead.
Oops, you're very.
I think you just have.
I don't know if that's him talking or if it's some other noise.
I think he's trying to get ready with the speakers maybe in the headset.
I agree with you, dude. We should be on the moon. It wouldn't surprise me if we have some kind of technology on the moon, like right now.
Oh, also, it might get enrolled. America has a really bad obesity problem. They're saying it's a national security threat. There aren't enough volunteers for the military who are in shape or something. Well, maybe something as awesome as an actual go to space army and go to space places would encourage people to become fit enough to be part of that. Is there a problem?
We can hear you,
well, no, hey. Well, think about it. Hey. It's kind of like if there's let's say that they build a moon on the base and it's like they build some sort of Trump tourist casino hotel on the moon, okay? Let's just say it happens for fun, okay?
Let's hope it happens.
People are going to want to go there, okay? And if you have to be physically fit to not die going there, then I'm pretty sure more people are going to, be inclined to want to be able to meet those requirements.
Let's just then you have to take into consideration the fact that there's literally no other agency, there's no other nation on the planet that has a spacefaring military force. Not even the Russians do. And they are the only people that actually have the boosters at the moment to do it.
Yeah, and look at another example would be just the raw number of satellites, whether we're talking about commercial or military. It's U.S. dominated.
It's so ludicrous. It's such a ludicrously stupid idea. Almost as bad as the Star Wars program. Although I think this is even worse because not only do we have military dominance, we could basically intercept any kind of space attack with our satellite system. So all we'd have to do is just send a counter missile.
Well, we don't like
shoot a troop transport. And that's the end of that story.
Well, the thing is, Sorry, go ahead, Gordon.
Go ahead, dude. Sorry, I talked for a while.
I'm just saying, to intercept it, we'd have to intercept it within Earth's orbit. We can't intercept it outside of it. It'd be very difficult and expensive.
I mean, if it's a nuke, you can't do it that way. But if it's a troop transport, then you could just shoot. It doesn't matter exactly where you shoot.
Yeah, I'm just saying that the thing is, you can't really protect against it if you shoot down the satellites of your enemy.
Yeah, like China, they've been shooting down their own satellites with lasers just to prove they can do it.
Mm-hmm. So being able to have control in space, and if you are going to have a great war, like a World War III or something, you would take down the enemy's satellites from space, where it's pretty much almost impossible to stop if you're the only one there controlling it.
Well, you see, we're also moving past the era of like where satellites are relevant to taking down ICBMs. I mean, they're relevant for monitoring and detecting energy fluctuations and whatever at ICBM sites. But all you have to do is you put some drone next to the launch site that has the capability of disrupting the entire site. Maybe it blows up and does an EMP on the site, or maybe it does something else. Like a lot of these launch pads are just like in North Korea. I mean, they're just out in the open on the ground.
I mean, alternatively, we could go full Call of Duty Ghost and just use a giant mass driver satellite to just destroy the facility.
So you see one of these things like spiking up, right? So like you have the drone go in, and this is only one of many options, and it launches its EMP or whatever. Or like, let's say you have a ship or some other ground-based thing, and all it does is it hits the launch site with a certain type of energy. And it either destroys or disrupts the site.
Yep. Or there could even potentially be some kind of ground-based antenna array system that could charge the ionosphere through which the projectiles have to re-enter through, and do something to conduct a lot of geomagnetic energy directly into that object, vaporizing it, simply by having its interference with Earth's electromagnetic field being detected, and then using some kind of HARP-like system to direct energy directly through that same field into that object.
Yeah, and that might be like, I was reading about anti-gravity, and that might kind of be how they're doing anti-gravity. It's not really anti-gravity. What it is it's manipulating electromagnetism with like these large arrays. So like you have an array like in Alaska, like HARP. And what it can do is it can make an object in like over the South Pacific and resist like an anti-gravity aircraft because of the way that you manipulate electromagnetism across a certain line. Like you attune the object to the radio frequency somehow, and it makes that object resistant to gravity. I mean, don't ask me to explain it all, but like,
my theory is that I'm not sure if it's actually like putting out any kind of external force so much as it's using the effect called quantum locking, where it has a fixed position relative to a point, and it can then change that point electromagnetically without actually accelerating or decelerating with some kind of like propellant, the way that you would with a rocket or like a jet engine pushing out air.
Mm.
So it's kind of like, I know I've seen these things at trade shows. They're these little magnet things. They're super cold. They're coated in liquid nitrogen right there as people are showing you them. But basically, they can make these things hover in fixed positions relative to the thing.
Yeah, that's a property of superconductors when exposed to magnetic fields.
I'll be right back. You guys keep it going after.
So if you were to have a ship that the construction of it is, say, a circular towards the center of its mass, so maybe some sort of like disc or saucer-like shape in which the outer ring contained some kind of, superconducting, I don't know, I'm going to assume it's going to spin around on the inside of a disc track just for the sake of assumption. But you could probably use some kind of system like that, using the Earth's core as like the primary in relative to this magnet.
Just triangulate it, right? Basically is what you're talking about.
Well, I'm just thinking, I'm just thinking of it in terms of it being the fixed point that the other things are fixed to.
Mm.
So it's kind of like, I'm this many kilometers above the core of the Earth at this, what is it? I'm trying to remember my Navaball, whether I put the longitudinal or latitudinal first.
It'd be latitudinal if you're trying to align it with the axis or the poles.
Okay.
Yeah. Longitude controls east and west. Latitude controls north and south.
Well, I mean, I guess if it's going to be moving, it's going to be acting on both of those two things. Because it's not just necessarily going to be moving in a straight line, north or south or east or west.
All right. I suppose. I mean,
I don't know. I'm just pulling this out of my butt. I know very little about physics beyond like the high school level.
Fair enough. Let me think. Let me think about that. Actually, my belief is that it would that the force would typically go to whichever pole it's sort of inducted towards. Or whatever it's induced towards. In ferric metals, for example, they tend to align themselves in such a way that their electron fields produce a magnetic field that goes in the opposite direction of the magnetic field that is inducing it. So that way, that's how the attraction occurs.
And that's like the reason why we live in a matter universe as opposed to an antimatter universe, is because at one point there was a tipping point, and it all went to like what we consider, matter. Am I correct in that?
That may be one hypothesis, but it's not necessary. But the truth is that we don't really have a definitive explanation for that.
We're talking about the origins of the universe, but
right.
I think I've read that one before where they were trying to explain, like, why isn't the universe made out of antimatter? And that was the reason, is because of polarization.
That may be one possibility, but we haven't been able to. But at the very minimum, we haven't been able to experimentally verify that. I would stray away from trying to speak about that as some kind of hard fact. We don't even have the data to verify that explanation is the case, and that that's not even talking about other solutions like string theory, which is a whole other can of worms that I don't want to go into tonight, because even that stuff is way above my pay grade and degree to actually be able to explain.
How familiar are you with M theory?
M theory?
Yeah, that's what I gravitated towards.
All right. I honestly don't know a lot about M theory personally. What I have, just the little bits and pieces of what I have heard about through my professors. My understanding of M theory is that essentially there is a way there. At a certain dimensional point in our universe, there is a point where every force field that we understand, gravity, electricity, and magnetism, the weakened strong nuclear forces, all derive from a singular unified field.
Field theory, yeah.
And that in actuality, these four fundamental forces are actually all different phenomena of the same field. But the problem with us trying to verify this is that for us to, and this is done through a process called supersymmetry. Now, but the problem is that trying to actually verify that this is true means that we're requiring at minimum to enter into between the 7th and 11th dimension of our universe's frame of reference. And currently we are only able to perceive 4.
And isn't what you're discussing there the reason why they're bickering about whether there's 10 or 11 dimensions?
Well, that's part of it. M theory is a simplification. M theory, in some ways, is, to my understanding, is a simplification. Because before this, it was an even worse problem. At the time, you had about 7. The problem required at least 17 dimensions, between 17 to 19 different dimensions for you to be able to solve through. Which is such a ludicrous problem to try and to solve, that unless you have a Rick and Morty's vortex generator, you probably wouldn't have the necessary technology or capability to even be able to comprehend, much less understand how to make it solve that problem. But
well, it looks like we have a couple of new visitors here.
Yeah, sorry, I accidentally.
But M theory did
instead of invited in.
Yeah, but M theory, by taking a few, by making a few further assumptions, was able to cut down the number of dimensional constraints to be able to prove string theory down to the 10 or 11 that we know now. It's a little more feasible, but it's thus far, we've only been able to mathematically prove that it's possible. We haven't been able to experimentally verify it.
Hey, Daniel and Dasa. What's up?
What's up?
So it's a possibility. It's a possibility. We just have no idea how we're going to prove it.
Are you guys there?
It
Dasa?
looks like they're typing instead of chatting.
Daniel said something. I saw his name.
Benny and Kenny versus Spinny. Yeah, 1 second. I'll turn on mic.
Hello.
I think we're getting trolled here.
Hello.
We'll give him a shot.
Yeah. Hello.
What's up, you guys?
Yeah.
Hello.
I think there's some kind of echo with you, Dessa. Daniel.
Hi.
Yeah, we're getting trolled.
Yeah, we're getting trolled.
Oh, we've been trolled.
Give them the boo. Give them the boo.
GG.
JT kill.
Oh, any oh, never mind. You're making a
Why
reference
are
to
we
somebody
getting
coming in. I thought you were referencing something else.
Huh? I was referring to the troll song, but then.
Oh no, something you said reminded me of the fact that the North American Championships for StarCraft 2 is about to start. Some word you said sounded like a player's name.
Oh, fuck. haven't kept up.
Are
with
they
StarCraft
starting to
at all.
swarm us with like? Are they starting to try to troll swarm us or what?
You know,
You can't just let us discuss physics. You got to come in here and troll us.
No,
Come on, you guys. You could figure out someone better to troll than like some physics geeks.
you know, truth be told, like I've described American politics right now as sort of like that one Terran player who decides to send all of his Marines into their bunkers down into a Protoss army.
See, this is where
The
Zoom
Protoss
should.
siege army.
This is where.
Just
Hang on.
not even A clicking, just like moving and then like triple stimming.
So this is where Zoom should allow us to say these guys are trolling.
Yeah,
I just got a physics for fags trying to join.
Oh, wait. Come on, don't associate me with that kind of language.
No, but I'm just saying, not
It's
a troll.
hilarious.
If you are.
Bling, bling. All right, let's let the trolls. All right, trolls. Type in the topic that you want us to discuss, and we'll consider discussing it.
Honestly, I wouldn't
At
mind
least until the show host gets back.
Not a troll. Well, put your name in instead of saying not a troll. I'll just keep booting you, man. I'm not, I couldn't give a fuck, man. I'll just keep removing you. And I'll just keep doing it. I don't care.
Ryan's obstinate. You won't beat him.
Holy crap.
Jason Alexander, wow.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it.
Jerry!
It's gonna be funny if Shirley or Stevie pop up and we accidentally ban them.
That's happened before.
That'd be so like that'd be like the ultimate punchline. It's just sort of like, no, I didn't mean to do that.
But that's happened before where people have gotten booted because they were.
Okay, can I just say something? If you want to join, you need to type it in chat because
this is awkward for me.
The conversation has been locked. The conference call has been locked, so nobody can join at the moment until you actually say something in chat and we know who you are. So yeah, so go fuck yourself, trolls.
So
well said.
On the topic of the Trump Space Force and how it relates to our physics discussion, though, where exactly were we on that?
StarCraft. That's where we were.
Yeah, StarCraft.
It's just more Trump's.
Build shit. Like my only guess is that Trump's strategy is just to build like a shit ton of medevacs in order to drop them over on the other side of the globe, probably somewhere in China.
But that works. Karen, medevac drops are a legitimate top tier, Masters League, Grandmasters League strategy. So.
Yeah. The only problem is if your opponents are smart enough to just stack fucking missile turrets.
Well, I mean, think of it though. I mean, here's the thing. I don't think they'd be doing this unless they had some new game-changing technology. I don't think that they'd be trotting out the conventional style of, liquid rockets that are currently being used for the Space Force. So I'm thinking if they have some kind of, I guess you described it as induction. So if they have some sort of electromagnetic induction drive they can put on like some sort of space plane, could it not potentially be maneuverable enough to avoid missile intercepts?
No.
I have no idea. I just don't think they would be doing this if they didn't have some game changer.
Yeah, we're just going to start mass producing LeVar Burton cruisers.
No, I'm just saying, I don't think they'd be trying to do this if they didn't genuinely have something. I don't know what. That's just an example.
They're trying to move it to the next phase, and that's why they need to establish legal precedents, for example, is because we are moving into the next phase. And that's why we'll see challenges to some of these conventions around space warfare and other types of technology.
We're legitimate starfighters. Jesus Christ.
Hey.
just like stack Vikings and medevacs. Like, what could go wrong?
Just use drones. Have like an ICBM that's composed almost entirely of drones.
Oh god, that would be depressing. Like, we invest all this money into just building medevacs and Vikings, and they just start China just starts mass producing widow mines. We get instantly countered. It's true. They can't kill us with them, but we'll burn all our resources trying to kill them.
It's absurd, isn't it? Beyond fucking stupid that we're at this point.
Well, I mean, though, that's the thing, though. Once we escape Earth's gravity well and we're all, like, independent of Earth, then we can really start to accelerate shit, because then we don't need to just keep one planet intact.
I don't know, man. If we're willing to do things like kill, like, 500 million, 600 million people in a day, I don't think we should move that model out into the wider universe. I think that there's life out there. And, like, you know, if we're going to fuck something, then we'll fuck ourselves and let's just have done with it.
You know, that's
babies don't deserve to survive if they're going to engage in these mass slaughters constantly.
I think I heard somewhere on one of these Fermi paradox discussions somewhere that based off of the estimated age of the Earth and the universe and the composition of each generation of stars with heavier elements building up over time and all that stuff, isn't it the case that Earth is within the first 8% of potential life-bearing planets to have been created over the lifespan of the universe? Like, in that case, if that is true, if that model is accurate, then wouldn't that mean that we would have the opportunity to establish an early advantage rather than not do that?
We have no way of knowing, like, how many intelligent species have arisen in the we don't even have a clear conception of what intelligence is. I mean, are we talking about, like, the ability to move from star to star? How many organisms?
Oh no, I'm just talking about, like, supporting a biosphere in general in terms of that. Like, you know, how much iron do you need on the planet in order to ensure that you can have an iron-based hemoglobin kind of thing?
So we're talking about things that would be very similar to us.
Yeah, I'm not talking about any kind of potential alternative structure for life. I'm just talking about human-like life. Or I should say Earth-like biology is what I actually should say.
But as we move off the Earth and into the wider universe, our competition will be things that are not human and not necessarily hemoglobin-based, but they can do things like move star to star. I mean, that's really the thing, is, like, they can move star to star and they, you know, have a consumption-based paradigm, whether it be biological or social or whatever. That's going to be our, like, you know, how many Earth-like, I mean, worlds are out there? Probably. I mean, I believe that it's quite possible that we're on the edge of some kind of event horizon type effect, and that might be why the universe seems infinite to us. Now, again, I'm not a physicist, but it appears almost, it just seems to keep going. There are several models that suggest you put the infinity symbol in it. Like, so, you know, is the universe infinite? Then, like, numbers are irrelevant at that point. If the universe is finite, then we can start taking into consideration how many, you know, hemoglobin similar life forms are out there, or how many competitors we will have as we go out into space.
Oh yeah, we have no real way of knowing that.
But
now.
if the universe really is infinite, then such numbers are irrelevant. There's an infinite number of every type of permutation.
Well, that does definitely make things, I don't know, I'd almost say make things less interesting, because you wouldn't be able to have any kind of status quo develop. It would be constant chaos. Like there would be well, not necessarily, I guess. But I was just thinking about that. I think I might have mentioned this one time before, but I'm still not even convinced that. So, okay, physics guy, what's your name? I can't remember.
Aeolus?
Nailus?
Aeolus. It's
Nailus.
yeah, like the name is Greek, but
okay. Well, my
Greek
question for you.
Actually, not Greek.
Okay, so when it comes to now, tell me if this is just a terrible, really layman's oversimplification or misunderstanding of something. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So time and space are indistinguishable from each other. We experience linear time because we happen to be moving in a specific direction through space. That is what they say, right?
Actually,
like, do we have some kind of time momentum that was imparted to us, or the particles when they were created or whatever, that it's moving along a specific direction in time, and that could other objects be moving through different directions in time from different originating sources?
That's not the worst explanation. So yeah, so the idea is that in order for you to move through space, it does take away a little bit of your velocity from time. That's one of the basic presuppositions of Einstein's general relativity. And as a consequence of Einstein's relativity theories in general, so that's why objects moving at the speed of light experience this massive time dilation.
Well, I thought that was because their inertia increased their mass to an infinite point, and that's why they experienced time dilation.
That's the other part of it.
And also, I mean, like time, like let's say we were closer to the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy, like time would be very different for us.
Oh yes, I definitely
like, or if we had some other kind of crazy gravity event going on, like, you know, time is different for us than it is for something like that's.
Can I use a rocketry analogy for this whole direction through time thing? So you're saying that because our velocity through time has changed due to our moving through space, so for example, let's say that I'm in a rocket and I'm in some sort of stable orbit around the Earth, okay? Mm-hmm. So let's say instead of trying to like lower or raise my periapsis or apoapsis at their opposite points, let's say I'm at like an inflection point between the two of them, and I'm trying to burn in order to, you know, move out of that orbit. Right. It takes a lot more delta V to accomplish that at the inflection points on either side than the apoapsis or periapsis of the orbit. So, but the way that you see this happen in terms of like mechanically, in the sense like the fuel being consumed, you're burning more fuel to get the same result because of the time in the sequence you're doing it. And this part where I think it matters where you're moving through time is that if it wasn't one of these variables that can be shifted, why would it be being shifted when we're exerting force in the other directions? Okay, maybe this isn't going to make sense without necessarily looking at the interface that I was looking at when I came to this kind of way of thinking.
Do you have an image of this that I could look at?
I can just tell you what to Google search. If you're at all familiar with any of those orbital mechanics games that have been coming out recently, I've been playing the hell out of one of those. I have about 320 hours in Kerbal Space Program.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So what is it called? The one part of physics that I know about, other than what they taught me in high school, is rocketry. Like delta V calculations and what is it called? What was the other thing? Phasing angles and all that kind of orbital mechanics.
You see, that I actually don't know. But that I've always thought of those as more of an engineering problem than a theoretical physics issue.
Well, it's because the mass of the ship is different depending on where it is in its orbit.
Right. Well,
Then you're relating that back to our discussion about time. Then
Yes, and because the heavier an object's mass is, I think an object is capable of dilating its own local time, in the sense that if I was let's just say I was an entity that was like the size of a small moon or something, just somehow time would be different for me than even a creature, over there, like in a separate local time, if you know what I mean.
yeah, I mean it's hard. Like we can't really discuss time without like discussing the observer. Like time is relative to observation and conditions.
Yeah, and you're right too, because even a tree, if a tree's processing speed to detect fluctuations in the environment is so slow that it can only detect seasonal changes, not local day-to-day changes, then it would experience time differently, even though it has a much heavier mass than a human, which would imply it would experience it differently for that reason alone, because its processing speed would be just way slower as well.
But would it be able to perceive the difference? I mean, again, I mean, we could observe the heavier creature and the lighter creature and note the differences, right? Let's say there was a time dilation, a noticeable time dilation between the two. Like we could observe those differences, but from the point of the observer, would there be a difference? Okay, so like now expand that concept out and say, well, we exist within a time constant. Like, are we able to see outside of that and observe into it to see where the flaws in our theories about time exist? And that's kind of like, I'm probably explaining it badly, but that's kind of where M theory and string theory kind of come in. They try to be that outside observer. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why like a lot of it's unprovable, because like the fish can't like tell you what it's like to breathe air, no matter how many theories he comes up with about what air is like. If he can't experience it, he won't know. He won't have a clear idea of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like we didn't evolve to leap out of the way of fifth dimensional predators.
Well,
which we typically refer to as cancer.
It's hard it's hard to tell, like, maybe we do interact with these higher dimensions in ways that we don't understand. And so, in fact, we are, quote, hopping out of the way of the predator. We just don't know it.
Yeah, that's absolutely a way of putting it. Because if you start getting really esoteric about it, there's all kinds of stuff that could be some kind of psychic predator trying to come after you.
Well, what I mean by the predator is like the ability to maintain like cohesion within time and space. Like, we're not aware of how or why like we do this. We just do it, right? But we're clearly interacting with this process, since we seem to be the, quote, end result of it. So, like, but we're not aware of how all this shit goes on. I mean, so again, like, we could be like, awareness comes from more than just one's, conscious perception of reality, or even the perception of the brain as a whole. I mean, it's a whole body thing, and that goes all the way down to the quantum level. You are made up of quantum entanglements. You are made up of all of these forces that we're talking about, and you're interacting with them as we speak. The degree to which you're interacting with them is difficult to tell. There's some people that think that time like is omnidirectional, like you were discussing earlier.
The what is it called? Yeah, that the whole thing with omnidirectional time, I think that for me, that's what breaks down the idea of like personally, I'm not like a creationist or anything like that, but I don't think that the Big Bang really holds up. Like, I think that it was a good enough theory in a sense, and it can explain a bunch of stuff, but there's definitely a lot of stuff that kind of breaks down, where it's kind of like, you know how we call like a black hole is like a singularity, and we can't see past the event horizon because there's no information is capable of escaping from it. Well, how do we know that what we perceive as the beginning of time isn't just behind something that we can't see past because no data from past that point is available?
Well, that's the $1 million question cosmologists are still trying to figure out. And to be honest, we're still trying to figure out. The Big Bang is mostly a name that we give as an explanation for the expansion of the universe that we tend to observe via telescopic data. But as far as like a definitive explanation of like, do we know this is what happened for sure? The simple answer is that it's our best explanation we have at this time. It's kind of like, in that sense, it's a little like string theory, although we do have more evidence to support it. The problem is that we are there to observe it. So this is our best guess as to what had happened.
The most recent episode of Electric Universe that I watched, it was really ripping it on the cosmic background radiation concept, saying that, you know, we don't have any kind of receivers designed to detect it far enough out from the solar system to say that we can't just explain it by unaccounted for interactions between like Earth and the other planets and the sun's magnetic fields and stuff.
Yeah, like it's a local phenomenon is what that argument is.
Like, because one of the things that I remember, this was actually just declassified. This was something that was in some of those things that Trump had declassified. So apparently, and you can verify this up for yourself. It might even be fake news that I was duped by because it was just such awesome sounding. Okay. But they were saying that there are certain aspects of Earth's weather patterns that are specifically the types of clouds that form the way they do and then drive certain types of weather patterns because of conditions in the ionosphere, which are in constant fluctuation due to interactions with the sun, as well as the interactions between the magnetic cores of Venus and as well as some sort of electromagnetic force from Jupiter. The people in the Electric Universe documentaries and shows are claiming that the existing model for celestial body phenomenon and like astral observation type stuff, the current establishment theories completely refuse to take into account the electromagnetic forces alongside the more conventional Newtonian forces in their modeling of these types of things. And it's, again, this compartmentalization of information that I think there's probably a better explanation that we just haven't had handed to us yet, but people probably know it. Because we're getting to the point where people are able to kind of do their own research independently because way more people have degrees now. So it's just kind of like one of the big things about the Electric Universe things is they're always, now some of the people they have on do seem like crackpots, but a lot of them seem like legit people who are just being shut out of establishment acceptance of their ideas.
Well, I mean, there are some ideas like that do get fall out of favor. Sometimes for politics, others just speak for convenience sake. A good example of this, of a theory that I've come to really like, but I know it doesn't have a lot of institutional support, is called pilot wave theory. So the pilot wave theory for quantum particles. Now, the idea, how much do you guys know about quantum physics?
Very little.
I've studied it as a layman for like over a decade, but okay. As far as it's been casual study.
Okay, so but you probably have a basic understanding of one of like the basic principles of quantum mechanics, being that the universe is inherently non-deterministic.
Yes.
The reason why in quantum physics why quantum physicists typically describe this as non-determinist, the universe is ultimately non-deterministic, is because of the adoption of what we classically refer to as the Copenhagen interpretation. This was a model that was promoted by physicists such as Niels Bohr, Schrödinger, and a few others whose names honestly are escaping me at the moment.
Well, Schrodinger's cat, the famous experiment, you don't know.
But, however, one of the people who was very instrumental in developing quantum physics was Louis de Broglie, who was, in some ways, a protege of Albert Einstein at the time, though he did not personally study under him during the period that he published his groundbreaking research thesis that earned him a he was the reason why we're able to describe a light as both particles and waves, and electrons as particles and waves, even though classically electrons are typically referred to as particles, light is typically referred to as waves. But de Broglie was the one who sort of unified the two and said that they are both different modems of the same experiential phenomenon. Anyway, de Broglie was not in favor of this standard Copenhagen interpretation. He and Einstein felt that it was way too that God essentially Albert Einstein's critique of it was that God does not play dice with the universe. To which Bohr's reply had been, and at the time, don't tell God what to do. So what de Broglie figured was actually going on was that the wave, in order to account for the wave behavior in particle that small particles exhibit, such as electrons, there had to be another method by which these particles are exhibiting these wave-like properties. What he argued was this idea of a pilot wave. Now, let me see if I can pull. Actually, I can't post it because YouTube doesn't post a few links, and I'm doing this on my phone. So I'll briefly explain pilot wave. Essentially, imagine a droplet bouncing on the surface of a liquid. It's just bouncing in and out, but it's never getting absorbed. If you introduce a wave into that, and you just set it slightly offset from the initial point of contact of release of that droplet, it's going to move in the direction of those ripples in a sort of a predeterministic pattern based on its location and based on where the direction of the wave is traveling at that specific point in time when it recontacts with that wave.
Like a crystalline pattern?
Huh?
Like a crystalline pattern?
You can think of it that way.
Just a constant pattern with distinct, consistent iterations between it.
I guess that's one way you could describe it. The whole point of this is, the long and the short end of it is to sort of dumb this down, is that the pilot wave behavior for particles is not a randomized occurrence. It is a deterministic one.
Well, actually, I can think of a way it could still be random and appear to be deterministic, though, based on the way you described it. What if, all these sequences that it's going through in a set pattern. So what you're saying is that it's incapable of infinitely sustaining itself in a static form, but it's capable of transitioning between states that in specific sequences are able to be sustainable, just not all in one state all at one time. Is that kind of what you're saying? Is that like that state that it's existing
or
in?
is it? is it like this? Like, let's say you had like a hollow globe or something, right? And you put it between like the sun and the ground, so it casts a shadow. Okay, and in the globe there was a crystalline pattern, a pattern of like dots or something that had a consistent iteration between them. Okay, so when you looked at the globe, you would see the crystalline pattern clearly, but when you looked at the shadow, it would no longer be crystalline. There would not be distinct iterations between the points if you move the globe. You know how shadows fall on ground and they kind of distort? So, I mean, is that what you're kind of getting at?
Well, I thought it was more like a multiple populations scenario when it comes to genetics, which is that it could have all started out. So think of so if biology is a chemical reaction that found a way to become self-sustaining, then could these pilot waves not be reactions that have found a way to be self-sustaining? I might be totally misinterpreting that.
That's actually a question that is beyond my ability to answer. What I recommend, there's a couple of good videos for those in the audience and for you guys as well to sort of see from Vertcoin and PBS Spacetime. They've both done really good videos sort of explaining this in much better detail than I could ever hope to. I would highly recommend these resources for you guys to turn to if you'd like more information about the subject.
All right, so I'm looking at some of it right now. Let's see what we can. Okay, let's look at some of the critiques of it that are put in a. All
right. The big problem with doing it this way is that the one advantage that the Copenhagen interpretation has over this pilot wave model is that the Schrodinger model is the Copenhagen model is so much easier to calculate for. In order to get these deterministic patterns, you have to take into account where in this wave it's landing, what velocity it's initially traveling at, what's the velocity of that wave, how does that wave impart its momentum onto that particle, and you can kind of see how the stacking of variables quickly make this problem very complicated.
Okay, I see. This makes it make a lot more sense. The wave function never collapses.
Right.
Bloody nerds.
So that's the way to, probably the easiest, most concise way to put it, that I think the most people would understand if they were studying physics at all.
Too much nerd talk.
Because the fact that the wave function never collapses, explains a lot of this.
Well,
I gotta know.
Well, think of it this way:
too much nerd talk.
Algae is some kind of complex carbon chemical reaction that has found a way to not stop being a chemical reaction indefinitely. I'm just thinking, to me, that seems like the exact same kind of phenomenon in the sense that, okay, life took the form that it did because all the other random forms it was potentially trying to take couldn't sustain themselves. They just weren't suited to the environment that they were in. So could there have been, at the beginning of the universe, way more types of particles than exist now that we couldn't even find a way to measure them because they don't exist anymore, but they were less sustainable, and only the particles that are left are the ones that don't have wave functions that collapse?
Well, I mean, there are higher level. I mean, it's not so much that they don't exist. It's just a lot of those higher mass particles are no longer stable in the energy environment that we currently have. For example, in quantum physics, there are beyond the first generation of leptons and fermions. There is a second and third generation of quarks that are typically that we typically classify. So these are the top and bottom, and the charm and strange quarks, and their associated fermions. But the problem with these ones is that they while they do have more mass, they are a lot less stable at and only really exist in high energy scenarios. And once that energy is gone, well, they quickly devolve into the lower energy state quarks, such as the up and down quarks that typically form the protons, and neutrons. So
because there's the state vectors, like it never reduces, it never in the wave function never collapses. The reason why they state that this is because it exists as a separate element of reality, okay? And I think in that they're falling into the fish trying to observe air trap. I mean, I'd have to read more about it, but I see that same flaw there. Is that that's something completely theoretical. The state vector exists as a separate element of reality. Like, I'm not seeing anything that expands or proves that. So that would have to be looked into. Like, what do they mean, a separate element of reality? It just sounds like something completely theoretical to me.
Well, I mean, yeah, it just seems like it kind of, that sounds like a wizard did it to me.
A separate element of reality. I mean, that could mean, are they referring to like the energy, like a specific energy state, or are they just, or is it just pure theory, or what are they talking about here?
In Pilot Wave?
Yeah. I mean, that's why they're stating that the wave function never collapses, is because there is something else there.
Honestly, this is going to be me totally going way off topic, but I'm one of these occultist people who believes in the principle of as above, so below. Okay, so in the same way that you can see these types of the same geometric patterns occurring both on the microscopic scale in the formation of certain minerals as on the large scale when it comes to large scale actual landform areas that are shaped by the same forces. It's just scaled up on like a kind of fractal way. It wouldn't surprise me if these waveforms were self-sustaining, because they were this is going to sound really crazy, and this is what they could be trying to say something like, and just not say it outright, or something equally outlandish, is that what if these waveforms are in their own little way that we're incapable of perceiving, behaving in a way so that they don't collapse? But that's attributing a lot to something that we wouldn't be able to even verify.
Well, I mean, that's the $1 million problem with basically most explanations we try to come through in science until we can experimentally verify it.
Yeah, it's kind of like, a fire will only burn as long as fuel keeps being added to it, or it can spread just directly to it. But an animal, which is like, a caloric furnace, it can consciously take the effort to prolong its life and then reproduce itself.
This is starting to make a bit more sense to me. Okay, what they're saying is that one function is going, or one function or one set of circumstances is going to push a function into a certain state, right? And because it's complete, because according to this theory, because the universe is a non-local phenomenon, right? Like, you can't just you inject what the theory is it's rejecting locality, as when we're talking about like the collapse of the wave function, for example. It couldn't collapse because it's not confined. you know, there's no degradation because for the same reason that, like, if you were to fire something off in space, for example, like, it doesn't
just
slow
keep
down.
traveling forever.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, at least theoretically speaking.
Yeah, you'd run into something, you know, there might be something
Yeah,
to slow you
and
down, but
Space technically is in a perfect vacuum, so maybe over the course of millions of years, it might eventually slow down just due to friction with stray hydrogen particles.
and that's basically why they're saying that the wave function doesn't collapse, is because of like a similar phenomenon. It's interesting. I'll have to read more about it.
Yeah, I mean, it started picking up a little bit more popularity, partly because we did start to get some kind of experimental verification when we began to observe the droplets in the silicon oil. Exhibiting these kinds of behavioral properties. And because of this, we were actually able to sort of reproduce the double slit experiment using these kinds of droplets. But with that said, you know, obviously, you know, like droplets on oil aren't quantum particles, but it at least serves as a proof of concept that this may be indeed what's happening. But partially because of tradition and partly because people don't want, why would you waste the time to try and come up with this super detailed model when this loose approximation is good enough? It's kind of why we don't use teach general relativity and general physics classes. It's like, why would you go through the painstaking effort of trying to calculate and take into account all these rotational variables when you could just use Newtonian gravitational mechanics to calculate orbital velocities?
Well, here's the thing. That's all well and good for convenience, but I'd rather be living in the country whose companies and factories manufacture with standards built on the more detailed system, even if it's more effort.
Right.
Because think about it this way. So one of the big problems I find, particularly in science, is this super compartmentalization where, you know, it takes so much to learn all of it that everyone's so specialized that they're overlooking things because something from another field could be related to their field and people don't even know it.
Well,
and this happens all the time in other fields. I'm more familiar with it. So I'll use an example from that. In archaeology, for about 100 years, the standard was using a carbon dating from clay pottery fragments to determine the site at which places where these fragments were found were built. Now, this has so many problems with it, but it was used for a long time because it was the only thing they had. Now they have much better computer models where they can simulate erosion on rocks, and you know all the properties are programmed in, the variables are lined up, and how much wind and rain erosion would it take to make something that would have looked like this look the way it looks now, that kind of calculation, and for also land formation. So right now in the scablands in the northwestern United States, they're doing a lot of like glacial erosion studies that are reshaping, using these types of computer models, they're reshaping the way it was all theorized before. And a lot of it displays this very fractal, you know, this is the exact same principle playing out on a much larger scale, indicating, you know, 400 times more water would have been here before to carve out the current the current like dale, but the current valley in the center of the dale. You know, the dale is a larger macroscopic copy of the valley within it, because the exact same forces with just a different quantity of water involved at a different point in history took place there. And one of the things that the establishment in archaeology is so furious about this is that all of these engineers and geologists are coming in and saying all of their books are wrong. and they're complaining and saying these people should not be allowed to even talk about this. This is what we're experts on. Leave us to our 100-year-old crappy methods and don't be coming at us with all this stuff that says that all of our existing books are wrong. So I think that there's way too much of that in all of the sciences.
Well,
Like,
I mean, on the other hand, you do get you do get a lot of assholes who think that because they managed to pick up a physics or chemistry degree that they become self-entitled to believe that they are the authority on every other subject in academia. And that's not exactly very helpful either.
oh, in the sense that, oh, all of your shit stems from this, so of course I would understand all of it just as well as you. No, I agree that isn't a helpful mindset at all. But I do think that that in the sciences there is way too much of a tunnel vision that stands in the way of a lot of progress, I think. Specifically because it's like, people don't want people from other departments coming in and telling them how to run their place, even if that collaboration of information from multiple disciplines, or simply having one person who's been trained in both disciplines intentionally, that person is going to have a much wider capability, I think, than someone who just uses a simplified model to make it convenient.
Well, I mean, we do, believe it or not, we do actually do a lot to try and limit that down, or at least tamp down on those becoming a significant problem. For example, my research group that I was a part of when I was in my, I want to say junior year of college, I was doing a study on the what was it? Organic photovoltaic candidates, and trying to develop a modified model in order to more accurately predict viable candidates for organic solar cell research. And to do that, we were working in combination with the chemistry department at OSU, and as well as I believe UT Austin, and a couple of other universities, to try and work out potential solutions for this.
Well, that's really great that they are taking a multidisciplinary approach.
So I don't want people to get the impression that this isn't stuff that isn't happening at science. In science, it is. It's just perhaps to your credit. To be fair to you, it might be very possible that it's still not happening as widespread as it needs to, which is something that would need to be discussed upon by the faculty and the researchers themselves. Unfortunately, human beings being human beings, just because something would be more efficient doesn't mean we naturally lean towards it.
So does anyone else who's come in at this point have anything more to say directly about the Space Force? Or I think
we've got Ryan tried to get us off of these topics, but we wouldn't listen.
I think there's only one thing we have left to say. Best Marines.
It's gonna be huge.
Look, if it's anything like the Marine, if they're anything like the Marines and Aliens, I might be okay.
No,
game over, man. Game over.
It's like Warhammer. No,
I remember that.
Warhammer 40K Space Marines.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, because God Emperor Trump, right? Yeah.
Hey Vasquez, has anyone mistaken you for a man? No. Have you?
They had a lot of good lines in that one.
I literally think that Trump might be.
Oh.
He's now beginning to actually take that God Emperor thing seriously. So now he literally wants to have an army of Space Marines to fight orcs with.
He's gonna put a military base on the moon, a military base on Mars.
And they're both going to be made out of gold.
Hey,
I'm going to make them out of gold.
He'll be Emperor Shaddam the 5th or 4th, whatever, from Dune. Remember Garden?
Yeah, they try and
Yeah.
mine all the gold, and then a Protoss army just comes in and just wrecks them.
You know,
Mine.
Wait, that was the
I mean,
Padishah Emperor, right?
yeah, the Padishah Emperor.
His daughter was the one who,
Princess Ireland.
narrated.
Yep. At least, yeah. If
This
pre-
is what
Well, even
happens
in the
when you
book,
try and
she
get
was
through the early game.
the book supposedly came from her. The first couple or something came from her diaries. The first one.
oh,
It has like a foreword.
yeah. I mean, if he ends up naming the military in space the Sardaukar, I might have to give him a little bit of props. Go ahead, Percy, as you were saying.
No, I don't need. I think I finished my point actually.
Okay. All right, we'll get off for the space farce topic, and
But Space Marines.
I'll be right back.
all right. Ryan, do you want to host, like, your thing?
On my channel.
Yeah, for open topic thing. Well, yours is always open topic, so.
Yeah, mine's always open topic. Yeah, right.
All right, I could just give you the Zoom host.
Hey,
controls.
if they do put a military base on the moon, will they still get TYT?
Oh,
That's
no,
the
probably
question.
not. No, it's just a healthy dose of Fox
Mm.
for
Fox
maximum
Street.
patriotism.
Stream live from Earth.
All right, let me know when you've got it hosted. I'm making you the host.
All right, I'll yeah, don't leave the room.
Yep.
I'll just open mine up and
When
it'll
it's
just
up.
go from
Yep, and when it's up, I'll shut my stream down.
yeah. Give me 2 seconds. I just need to open up the program.
All right, everyone. Ryan is hosting. It'll
about an
be
hour.
For about an hour for an open,
Yeah.
which is good.
Oh my
I need
God.
some sleep. And we could talk about anything. We could talk about.
Yeah, anything goes as long as you're not trolling and you're not insulting people.
Oh, shut up, you.
So my
I
first two
know.
ideas. No, I'm joking.
California DNC member suggests super delegate reform is part of Russian plot.
So
This is this has gone beyond parody. Is this a poll? Have
Is
they?
that from the Onion? That's
No,
got to be
this is
from the
from the
Onion.
Huffington Post.
Basically, the Onion. Yep, I'm up and
Yeah.
running.
Oh,
This
you got
is
up
real
and running?
life, though.
Okay.
That's the sad part.
right.
This is all real.
I'll,
This is all real.
so everyone in chat, if you guys haven't signed up to Ryan Bannock's channel, go ahead.
How do you do that from here?
If you go to,
Just
I'll share it
go-
within the Zoom, and I'll also share it within the live chat, so you can get there.
yeah. And it's
That
Go
pretty
back
is-
to the live chat back on YouTube. I'll have to go back and check that.
Oh, you can also do it here. I'm gonna share it within the Zoom application itself.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
There you go.
This is.
You guys might be about to get an echo from my phone. Sorry, hold on a sec.
No worries.
Yeah.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
See you guys at.
I'm gonna try and get to that Julian Assange thing tonight. I can't
Oh,
promise
you
anything.
are.
Yeah, I can't promise anything. Well, I had a good day in court today, so
Yeah.
You're
All right.
feeling inspired, huh?
I'm shutting down.
yeah.